everybody. Thanks for joining. Today, I'm going to be talking about search rankings at marketplaces. Very excited to be leading the first workshop for the Everything Marketplaces group. This is what the next hour is going to look like. First, I'll introduce myself. Then I'll dive into why search is important for marketplaces. Then I'll show you your options for improving your search rankings. And lastly, I'll work through a short case study on how my company, Relevance, worked with The Shoot, a marketplace for finding great local photographers to improve their search experience. I'll make sure to leave some time for questions at the end. Let's get started. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Zach Conn. I'm the founder of Relevance. I know some of you already, and it's nice to meet the rest of you. I was a software engineer for a while at 3 different marketplaces. First was Weave, and Weave matched together professionals for weekly coffee meetings. Next was HomeShare, and HomeShare helped people who are new to the city find a roommate. And most recently, I worked at Hipcamp, which allowed campers to search for private campsites to book and stay the night. In all of these experiences, I worked on the search and match portions of the marketplace. And these experiences led me to create Relevance, which helps marketplaces build custom search rankings without coding. I wanted to take what I had learned and give the power to anyone to create the best search rankings for their site. We'll go deeper into Relevance a little bit later, but first let's get into what search means for a marketplace and why it's important. So at its very core, the purpose of a marketplace is to connect 2 parties that would have not otherwise transacted. So you have your supply side and you have your demand side, but without you and your marketplace platform, the right people would not have found each other and been able to transact. And whether this is renting an apartment, buying a Beanie Baby, taking a yoga class, you help bring those 2 people together with your marketplace platform. And some of this might be familiar to you guys, but search is how these connections are facilitated in the actual product. Now, usually it consists of 2 steps. The first one is autocomplete. And this is something like, give me a general sense of what you might be interested in. This often looks like a big search bar, and it's usually something like location or product name or category. And that's what you see there on the left is an example of the autocomplete step 1. Step 2 is search results. This is like, okay, now that we have a starting point, here are a bunch of options that you might be interested in. And this is where I'll be focusing today. When I refer to search results for the rest of the presentation, I'm just talking about the list of results that come back, just like those campgrounds in the photo on the right. And you might be saying, Zach, I know what search is. I run a marketplace. Fair enough. I'm here to start getting into why showing the right search results, the best, the most relevant results to your users is very important and only increases as your marketplace gets bigger. So once you get more than a few listings, you're asking your users to do work to find the listing that they want. And scrolling or digging for gold, that's no fun. As anyone who has worked on conversion will tell you, if something is hard, your users will give up and use an alternative. This is demonstrated by a stat that we have over here on the right. 75% of clicks go to the top 3 results, meaning that if the right result isn't there, people will leave. Think about when you go to Google. What percentage of the time do you go to page 2? Hardly ever. Which brings me to my second point. Google has earned your trust. When you search for something there, you know the first result is usually what you're looking for. Showing the right result first earns you trust and credibility with your users. If you're showing low quality inventory, your users might think that that is the best you have to offer and lose interest and respect for your brand. If they somehow do realize that your best inventory is hidden, it increases their cognitive load and they have to do a lot more thinking and work to find the right connection on your marketplace. And not only will they be less likely to book this time, they'll be less likely to book next time because they know not to trust what you've shown them. So if you don't show users the right results and they do leave your site, this comes out in your conversion metric. The 2 main drivers of revenue for a marketplace are traffic and conversion. Conversion is a particularly tough one because users wanted to buy but couldn't find what they were looking for. It's like going to the grocery store looking for a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, but it's hidden under the bags of ice, so you walk out with nothing. It also hurts extra in a marketplace because each successful transaction hopefully breeds future transactions from the network effects that come in the form of reviews, referrals, and increased trust. Now here's the thing, showing the right search results has a large positive impact on conversion. Here's an example of 6 iterations that Airbnb did on their experiences search ranking. Up to 14%. That means 14% more revenue from a single improvement. Our results vary from marketplace to marketplace, but this is not inconsistent with our findings at Hipcamp at all. We actually saw some larger than 14%. And this was also backed up in user interviews that we did and full story sessions that we watched. If you direct someone down a path with a place that isn't well reviewed or is actually too far from them, they will bounce and leave your site. However, if you show them the right inventory, they will convert and have a good time using your platform. On top of this, your supply knows how important it is to be at the top of your search rankings. I just pulled some support articles from different marketplaces to make a point, but supply always asks how they can be higher up in search results. It was the #1 question we got from our hosts at Hipcamp. The other thing that is really awesome about being intentional about your search is it gives you a chance to align your incentives with your supply. If you want hosts to upload more photos, make it part of your rules for your search rankings and let your hosts know. If you want them to fill out a description, do instant book, price more competitively, just factor it into your search and let your hosts know. The last thing is this heavily discourages disintermediation. Now, disintermediation, just to recap, some of you might know this, but it's when supply and demand transact off platform in order to cut your fees out of the process. But if bookings are a factor in your search rankings, supply is incentivized to keep bookings on platform to increase their position in your search rankings. So hopefully you buy that search rankings are important and you're interested in learning how to order your search rankings a bit better. Now, there's a lot of info on this slide, but I'll summarize it real quick. You typically have 3 options for ordering your search results. 1, default sort. 2, weighted scoring. And 3, machine learning. So default sort means showing search results that are ordered by a single attribute, say price, high to low. This is the easiest option. It takes basically no work, but it's confusing for the user. Often you end up showing user results that are not optimal. On the other side of the spectrum, you have machine learning. This is when artificial intelligence helps determine the order of your results based on a feedback loop that you build into your product. This is the most complicated option. It often requires a team of machine learning engineers and data scientists to pull it off. However, if you can pull it off, it provides great conversion benefits. The other thing, though, is you need a lot of data to be able to make it work. Today, we'll be focusing on weighted scoring. This is where you have many weighted attributes that contribute to determining the order of your search results. And you can make really large conversion gains without a lot of the challenges of machine learning. So you might be wondering what factors should go into search results for my marketplace and how heavily should they be weighted? Well, this will be very different for each marketplace, but I wanted to talk through potential factors that could go into your marketplace. And so here are some sample factors for an Airbnb type marketplace. Now, first, all the way on the left, you have your attributes of a listing. Without the users telling me anything, does this look like a quality listing? Does it have enough photos? Is it in a good location? Has it been verified by anyone on our team? Those give you a sense of whether the user might be interested before they've actually told you anything. Next, you have leading indicators. These are the first notion that users might be interested in that listing. So these are things like, are users clicking on it? Are users saving it for later? Then you have revenue generators. Whoops, sorry. These are things like, did people request to use a service? Did they actually use a service? And finally, you have referral generators. These are the strongest indicators of quality. Did people feel compelled to leave a good review? Did they book again? Now remember, these will be different for each marketplace. And even this same factor can vary in importance between different marketplaces. So let's take location, for example. At Airbnb, location is very important. If you want to stay city center, it's important that the results they show you are very close to that city center. However, for someone like The Shoot, which is a photographer marketplace, location is a little bit less important since the photographer usually comes to you. Now, often it makes sense to start simple, maybe 5 factors, and build from there. If all this is overwhelming, there's a lot going on here, don't worry, we're going to ground this in a real life example soon. Now remember, the goal of all of this is to increase conversion. And the process to do that looks something like this. First, learn from your customers. What is important to them when they're making a purchasing decision? Do they care more about price or location or trust? Next, set up your rules for the first time or make changes to your existing rules. This looks something like adding new factors, adjusting the weightings, or changing the scoring within a factor. Now, for scoring within a factor, let's take a look at location at Hipcamp, for example. At Hipcamp, maybe you learn from your customers that everything within an hour or two drive is great for a weekend trip. However, when you get to 3 hours, that starts becoming less interesting for a trip. Now, you want to reflect those rules in your search ranking and maybe penalize for once you get farther away than 2-hour drive. Now, you can go really deep here. So maybe availability is important in the high season, but less so in the off season. Maybe scoring is different by market. At HomeShare, the roommate matching service that I was at, we did almost 100 iterations just while I was there of the matching algorithm. Lastly, you want to make sure you measure how it changed behavior. Did people transact more? Did they click through more? Then it all starts again, and hopefully each time you're driving conversion gains. Now, how do you measure improvements? I could give a whole presentation on this, but the 3 basic ways are: 1, do nothing; 2, pre-post. So this is when you measure what happened before and after the change. And 3, A/B test. This is when you split traffic to your original ranking and the new ranking. Now, you'd be surprised, a lot of people do not measure at all. Pre-post is useful for getting is mostly useful for getting a signal on did I really botch it. If you did botch it, you might want to go back to your original rankings and see what happens. If it goes back up, that might be a sign that something went wrong with your iteration that you had of your algorithm. Now, pre-post is not very reliable for measuring the impact because any number of factors can change between weeks. So say you get a bunch of new traffic from a low converting source, it may look like your changes to your algorithm made the impact when it was actually just a shift in traffic. So the best way to do it is A/B testing if you can. And here you can really measure the impact that your test had. So for example, you can learn things like your new algorithm had a 7% better conversion than your old. The one criteria here is you need to hit a certain volume of data for the test to mean anything to do A/B testing. So it doesn't make sense to do until you reach a certain size, say a few thousand searches minimum. But once you get there, this is definitely the best way to measure success. So say you wanted to improve your search ranking system. How would you go about doing this? Well, you have 2 options. You can build it in-house, or you can use a third-party tool to do so. The argument for doing it in-house usually comes around when you need high levels of customization. And the tools for this are Elasticsearch, Solr, and there are others as well. Now, third-party gives you greater visibility. Often these tools are no or low code, and it's usually lower cost. So some tools for this are Relevance, Algolia, SwiftType, and there are others as well. The other problem you often run into when building in-house is the game of telephone. So often the product manager wants to change, the engineer will implement it slightly differently, and the data scientist interprets the data a little bit differently, and no one's on the same page. A third party allows one user to go from ideation to execution to analysis without having to go through other channels. So my company, Relevance, allows you to build a weighted scoring system for search rankings and iterate on it without coding. You can test new versions and analyze performance from the online dashboard. This is a sample of what the dashboard looks like. We help companies set up their first weighted scoring algorithm. We also help larger companies move faster when iterating by having all the info in the dashboard. It brings a level of clarity that's often lost when complex rules live in code. For those smaller marketplaces, though, it is so important to get something up and running because unoptimized weighted scoring is just miles better than a default sort. Well, so now we'll quickly run through a success story where The Shoot, a marketplace for finding great photographers, used Relevance to drastically improve their search results. So this here on the left, this is what the search results for The Shoot look like. It's a list of photographers to book. And originally, the Shoot had their search results ordered by most recently updated. This means the first search result that shows up was the one that was most recently updated. And this is not necessarily what the users were looking for. The Shoot used Relevance to build a weighted scoring system that prioritized the important factors to their marketplace. Now, these are just a sampling of the rules, but all of these rules would add up to a score that's then used for ranking. So for example, a new listing created within 50 days from today would earn 10 points. That's that first rule that you see there. If you had at least one review, you would earn 20 points. If you had an average score of at least 4, you'd earn 25 points. Another 25 points for a 5 out of 5 review score. Again, add these up and that total score would be used for ranking. So once this was implemented, the order completely changed. New listings rose to the top based on those factors and other factors like bookings and reviews. And that new top listing, portrait photographer in London, the one that you see there, that was on page 4 before The Shoot implemented Relevance, meaning it was hidden, it was tough for people to find, and it wasn't getting the attention it deserved. So this has made a big difference for The Shoot. This is pre-post, but they're seeing increased click-through rate, inquiries, and bookings since they've implemented Relevance. And the people at The Shoot are awesome. There's a nice quote from Fiona over there on the right side about their experience. Now, the cool part about Relevance is it's no code. So you're able to iterate and make changes directly from the online dashboard. So coming up, they want to add a premium tier subscription. This is where listings will be marked as premium, and they'll be able to be boosted up in the search rankings. And now to do that, it's as simple as going into the dashboard and adding that factor. Premium subscription gets 50 points. That's everything. Thanks for listening, and I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, just really quick. Hey, Zach, yeah, first off, can't thank you enough for doing this because this is super informative. For everyone joining, we're going to upload the recording in the group, and then we'll share this deck too. But I just want to mention that right before we jump into some questions. But yeah, so let's see. Does anyone have any initial questions? Want to come on? I can unmute you, and you can come on if you do. Hey, Zach, I do have a question for you actually myself. So,
Sure.
Because we probably need to use this for studio time and think about it a little bit more. But yeah, so like for instance, in the case of The Shoot, and I know Fiona's on here, how often do you guys kind of readjust, you know, the ranking?
It's a good question. I can answer that a little bit, but maybe Fiona as well as here can. I believe that they're just kind of getting started setting it up, and plan on making some iterations moving forward. But
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, just to jump in, we only went live with it, I don't know, was it about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Zach? Yeah, so we've seen a definite increase in inquiries and bookings, and actually the photographer in the first spot is on a photo shoot right now, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, we will check in with it, but I think at the moment we probably need a bit more data. We're fairly happy with the results at the moment, but we'll just keep monitoring it and see if we want to make any tweaks.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing more about that. So.
Zach, I had a question. I know we touched base probably about a month or so ago. Excited to hear how things are going on your end with getting customers who think this is like a strong value prop.
Yeah, it's been going well. Been speaking to different customers and figuring out how we can best help them out. So it's been going pretty well.
Nice. And is there anything that you've learned over the last month from speaking to users that you didn't think before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I come from the world, I guess, where a lot of people are thinking about this all the time, but I would say that a lot of people just it's not on their radar of things that they're thinking about or working on. So yeah, I guess learnings on my side, it's been a little bit more about educating around the value proposition, the improvements that you can make, more so than I guess like talking about different alternatives for search.
Cool.
I'm also happy to, if anyone wants to talk about their specific marketplace and different factors that could be helpful to go into their search rankings, things like that. Happy to help out on that front.
Hey, yeah, I was going to ask you, Joel, did you and your team want to come on?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so we've got James, Claudia, and Chiara all here, and so with our site at the moment, customers often fill out a form, give us a bunch of information, and then our suppliers curate themselves essentially based on the info that's there. That being said, a lot of people prefer a different journey, and even if they go through that flow, still want the search journey as well. And even us internally, we want to have, you know, really effective way of searching, so we can manually help source the perfect suppliers sometimes. So yeah, I suppose it's something we're working on at the moment to improve, but it's quite hard because we've got just so many. A lot of our suppliers are very, very versatile, so they can be different things to different people at different times. But that being said, obviously we'd still want to curate them according to how optimized their supplier profiles are to a specific context. Because, you know, you're talking about cognitive load, for example, and, you know, it's very difficult for a customer to start imagining something else a band says they can be, rather than what they just see in front of them they are. But yeah, we're probably at the, I think, yeah, you've kind of answered this anyway in the presentation, but I suppose to elaborate advice for us, it kind of be, you know, we're probably not at that stage where we've got thousands of searches, say, per week. It's more in the hundreds. So I suppose the best way for us to put foot forward, we were looking at machine learning and things like this earlier in the year, but we've also only got a couple of engineers as well, and there's obviously loads of things across the site we're working on. So yeah, I suppose any overall thoughts there, just elaborating on what you've already told us, really.
Yeah, I'd love to learn a little bit more, I guess, like on how your search works. So you said it's like a form kind of where people fill out information, and then is there like a search results page, or is it where you suggest a specific musician or performer for them?
So it depends on how they come to our site. So if they've been searching for a specific band or a category type, they'll land at a certain landing page, and the journey can be a bit different, and it can be more geared towards like a traditional search. Often we try and channel people towards our homepage where it's all centered around filling out this form. So we gather this information, then we contact them. We've got a certain process around that. But even if they go through that flow, the customer is still able to, go on a more traditional search and navigation journey on our site, via menus and just searching in genre terms and keywords and things like this. But it's something that, versus say our top competitor, we're quite a bit behind them at the moment. So yeah, if that's enough detail.
If I could just jump in, I just to add to everything that Joel said as well, I think a big challenge for us is that when people are browsing, the result that they're most likely to land on is a video specifically, so videos of the bands. And I think a challenge is figuring out what kind of parameters of that video we need to be able to quantify to be able to filter, if that makes sense. I'm sort of a bit of a believer in probably following what the customers are doing naturally. And so actually I'm interested to hear whether having kind of like customer engagement with media and things like that is something that you would weight heavily. We do already have a sort of, we call it like a supplier scores, like the weighted scoring that you talked about, made up of reviews and song lists and bookings and that sort of thing as well. But yeah, I think the fact that people are looking at videos as the thing that they're landing on, it's quite hard to quantify what the things are in the videos and what they're going to be looking for. So any advice around that, I think, would also be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would try to identify the happy path that you have in your product for a customer to come to your site and then end up booking. So is that something like interacting heavily with the video, or is it I don't know, like seeing many search results or a single search result? Trying to identify like what path you would like to drive them down, and then using kind of the interactions with that path to weight in your search ranking. So if that means someone who's spending a lot of time watching a video of a band, like if that's a good signal that they're interested in that band, I think that would be a solid one to weight. But the cool thing is, if you have a good system like this that's set up with A/B testing, you can try it. You should just see if that's what if users respond to that, and if that increases conversion. And if it doesn't, worst case, it stays as the same. Best case, you get a nice conversion gain, increases revenue. So that's kind of my thought. And the one thing I did want to say though is the thousands of searches that was for A/B testing. That doesn't mean that you can't start making improvements to your search rankings before that. Anytime that you have more than 3 search results, it is important to start showing the right search results at the top, because as I mentioned in the presentation, people are lazy. They won't go deeper than a few results, and if they can't find what they're looking for, they'll leave your site. So even if you can't properly measure it, it still is important to start productizing good search results early on.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as far as for it not requiring thousands of searches, but even the smaller amount of listings and the results that show up on the page. So hey, Zach, I actually had a question for you myself. Yeah. So if we can go back to maybe this slide that was some of the data that could potentially be on the listing that could factor into the ranking. So. Yeah, right there.
This one?
Yeah, exactly. So in the use case of the shoot, if we can maybe just kind of speak to that, if that's okay, Fiona. But can we just maybe speak to how you decide on what attributes, maybe even if you needed to, first off, if they weren't available on the listings already, maybe some that could be potentially added, and then how you decided on which ones to kind of use with equating, that ranking.
Yeah. Fiona, you can jump in whenever you want as well, but we started out with bookings is a pretty good indication of, again, revenue generator. It means that someone got all the way through the funnel and they decided to book. So we started with bookings. What else was on there? We wanted to be able to give a bump for new listings as well. So basically give them a chance in the search results, allow them to get up to the top for a little bit and get some bookings and prove themselves basically. So that's kind of that creative out within 50 days thing that you saw there. Trying to remember what else was oh yes, review score. So that's about as good of a signal as you can get from a marketplace. As people are reviewing and they're saying good things about the listing that they transacted with. Trying to remember, I think we kept it relatively simple to start, but I believe there was about 5 or so factors that went into it.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And then maybe specifically to Hipcamp, if you could speak to that, was there anything like that was specific to Hipcamp? So I know, for instance, like their listings have, they have some of the response times and so forth. Was that kind of taken into consideration too?
Yeah, response time. You mean like if you like request a book, how quickly that the person responds to that?
Yeah. I think they have like the time and then the rate too on that, I believe. Totally.
Yep. So that was one of the factors that went into it. They had a lot of different factors that went into it. It got pretty complicated at Hipcamp. And kind of as I was mentioning, even within the factors, it can get pretty complicated. But there were things like location, click-through rate, bookings, reviews, review score. Trying to remember what else. But yeah, so things like location, for example, like it sounds kind of simple. It's like, oh, just factor in location, but it's like, okay, maybe if someone is searching for a campground, but they type in San Francisco, they don't actually want a campground in San Francisco. They want a campground somewhere that's in a nice place near San Francisco. But if someone searches for, Yosemite or something like that, they might want to be pretty close into Yosemite. So we had different kind of like scoring factors for different types of entities that you could end up on, like a park versus a city versus things like that. So, and again, like we were talking about, like if you're in a city, if you're within a couple hours drive, like that's great for weekend trips. But if you get further outside of that, that people don't really want to go drive that far for weekend trips. So we tried to factor that in as well. And then like, yeah, so you can do like location as like, basically expanding rings, like how far away are you from the original search point. So yeah, I know I'm kind of getting deep into this, but you can go really deep onto how things are scored. But yeah, so that was just a general kind of sense of how we scored things at Hipcamp.
Cool. Yeah, I think James actually had a question about Hipcamp. He just sent me a message. Did you want to come on, James?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Zach. So I was looking at the Hipcamp search page earlier today, actually, and it's really powerful. When you look at it, I think there's something like 40 plus different like filters and check boxes and sort of on-off toggles. So you can go really fine-grained. But I imagine like when Hipcamp first launched, they didn't have like all of that data and like a really powerful search page. And so I wondered, like while you were there, did you see conversion uplift from giving people more filters? Because some of the pushback we sometimes have like in our team is more filters doesn't necessarily equal a better search, or you might increase the chance of someone getting to 0 results, or it might be too complicated. But I wondered, yeah, when you were at Hipcamp, if adding more filters actually increased conversion, or whether you overwhelmed users with too much choice.
That's a great question, and something that we learned kind of along the way. I think originally we wanted to give people as much choice as possible. Hipcamps can be very unique. So if someone wanted to stay in a tree house on the beach or something like that, we wanted to make that those things available. We found ourselves running into some of the exact problems that you're talking about. You give user too much choice or too many filters, you can end up in what we call zeros, which is like when you filtered yourself into a place where there's no results. And that's just about the worst experience you can have on a site. So we started measuring zeros, and we wanted to figure out how we could reduce those zeros. And a lot of that did come down to reducing filters and removing filters that weren't useful to the actual booking decision. We started testing some of that stuff and ended up removing some optionality, to be honest, on the filter side, and kind of keeping the ones that we thought were most useful, and definitely wanted to remove ones. With filtering, you can end up all that stuff that I talked about with search results, where you want to highlight your best inventory. If you allow people to filter, you can allow themselves to get into a hole with your least valuable inventory. It's kind of a long way of saying that I agree with your statement, and I think it's important to give the right balance between the ability to filter down, but also making sure that people don't end up in an empty room.
And then with search more broadly, how do you think about, I guess, the sort of curation, like human curation side of search? So obviously you have some suppliers in your marketplace who are power users. They might not be like the best supplier in their category, but they have the fastest response time. They've filled out their profile, like on paper, according to a weighted scoring system, they might be a good supplier, but then when you actually look at the photos or watch the videos, they're sort of average. And then you have those amazing suppliers who are in high demand outside of your marketplace, and they're not really engaging so much, so their response time is slower, and they'll appear further down search, even though they are one of the best options for the customer. How do you factor in human curation into search, and how do you think about it with Relevance? Did you have aspects of curation in Hipcamp as well?
Yeah, good question. So I think a lot of marketplaces started out earlier on with a lot of curation. For example, at Weave, we were matching together professionals for coffee meetings. It was all done out of a spreadsheet. There was we had team members that every week they would go and find the right potential matches and putting them all together. And you want to start stripping away that human curation as you start becoming more confident in your ability to show the right people or match the right people. In terms of Hipcamp, we had some people who would look at incoming supply and verify it or basically remove it from the platform if it wasn't a good fit. But past that, it was all based on the algorithm. And so I think it is just working to get that right balance of the weightings, because the things that you mentioned can all go into the weighted scoring. So response time, things like amount of photos or stuff like that. I think it becomes a little bit of a challenge outside of search to make sure that your best marketplaces are engaged with your platform. Again, you can incentivize that type of stuff, but if they're not getting the kind of, I guess, traffic or booking, I guess that becomes more of a you want to bring them the business that they need to be able to engage with your platform specifically.
Cool. I think Claudia's got a question in the chat, who's also on our team as well. We're just sort of dominating the chat right now.
Those are great questions, though. So.
Yeah, a really good question.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this. It's really interesting. I suppose to me it all comes down to iterating on the search algorithm a lot and testing a lot, I suppose, like everything else. But since I got you here, it seems like you have a lot of experience with this. I'd be curious to know, obviously ideally you would have a team dedicated to this that constantly optimizes and tests. But if it's even possible to give this question an answer, like, do you have any sort of guidelines to what the bare minimum should be, would be my first question, in terms of like testing differences in the search algorithm. And the second one related to that is that you touched on conversion benchmarks earlier. You mentioned a case where there was a 14% improvement, and you said you've seen higher. And I suppose, yeah, if you could talk a bit more about that, I'd be really keen to learn, you know, about examples where these benchmarks were different, and why do you think that would have been?
Yeah. Sorry. So to just clarify that first question, you were saying like guidance for like a minimum of how often to iterate on your algorithm. Is that right?
Yeah. I know it's a weird question.
No, it's fine. I mean, one of the kind of things that prompted me to build Relevance and to work on Relevance is it is a hard problem, and without kind of a lot of people all in the same room, you can lose a little bit of momentum around it. And so that's why I wanted to build Relevance, which gives people the ability to run all of that a lot smoother and easier. All from one non-technical person can do that. The ideal system is you want to be at least letting your A/B tests run at least a week long, so that you can kind of smooth out any differences between like days in the week and stuff like that. So if you can be running A/B tests, you know, having like a different iteration run every week, that's great. If you get to a really big size and you're really going after this, you can run tests in parallel where you split your traffic and have different tests running against them as well. But you know, that's kind of when you get to a really sophisticated place with your search. I would say early on, if you're just if you're doing, you know, I would start small, just build the muscle of doing it. If you can do one test a week or a month, that would be awesome. The other thing is you may be limited by data, so you do need a decent amount of data to be able to properly A/B test. There's an awesome calculator which I can share after this, which says like what you just enter in kind of the inputs of your site and the conversion that you're looking to detect, or sorry, the change in conversion that you're looking to detect, and it tells you the quantity of data that you would need to run a proper A/B test. So I use that calculator all the time when I'm trying to figure out.
You're happy to share that. That sounds super interesting.
Yeah. I know Rich will want to see that too.
Yeah, I mean, A/B testing is something I spend a lot of time on, so I'm happy to talk all day about that. But yeah, so I'll share that calculator after. But that's just kind of my general guidance that I would give on how often to be running stuff. Again, start small, get some tests up and running, just get like a muscle of doing it, and then you can increase it if you feel confident with it. On the second front, I'll go back to that slide here. So this was for Airbnb's experiences that they have on their site. This was really cool to see that they've had some awesome conversion lifts. I want to be transparent about like the way that this works. A lot of times you will try to make changes to your algorithm and it will actually result in negative conversion lifts. It's part of the process, and what you do is you just stick with your original algorithm when that happens. So it ends up being, it's not like every time you're going to get a 14% conversion lift, but when it does, when you do strike on something that people really care about in your platform and you've incorporated in a real way into search, it's a high area of sensitivity. So it will move a lot. And yeah, we had one at Hipcamp that was higher than 14% as well. You know, we saw ones that were small as well, but each gain that you can make is really impactful to your business. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Really, that's brilliant, and they were two great answers. Just quick follow up on that.
Sure.
Do you think this conversion lift is it an addition of small changes? So like, is it? Presumably it's quite hard to see it in the first couple of iterations. So I'd just be curious to see with Hipcamp, for example, you know, how long did it take you to see this real change?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember exactly like when we saw like the really large changes, but it was when we introduced a new factor into it. It was it was something around kind of availability, you know, again, like we were leading people down these bad experiences where they would see an awesome Hipcamp and it just wasn't available. It was all booked up, and so then you know, people were having a bad time because of that. And we found out if we could show people, you know, solid ones that did have availability, that would really help. In terms of how long that took us to figure out and get there, it took some time. But yeah, well, like I can't actually remember from like when we started iterating on this to when we figured that out, how long that took. But you know, again, you see like some improvements along the way, and then like when you strike a big one like that, it's really, really empowering.
Great. Okay. Cool. So you felt like it probably was an addition of things, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint the moment that happened. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it may be 6 months, I would say, like after we started iterating that we figured that out, that like availability was really important. You know, a lot of it came from talking to users and all that type of stuff, but it may have been shorter than that too. I just, you know, it was a while ago, to be honest. So.
Of course, sorry.
All good.
Really cool. Helpful.
So I think we got time for about like one more question maybe. So I know Levi, did you want to come on?
Yeah. Zach, quick question on like, certainly I think like when applied to like a single domain destination, this makes a lot of sense, but I'm wondering like if your product is actually going to live on multiple domains, so think of like more like a B2B or a SaaS integration, how then you look at sort of ingesting data from multiple sources to then kind of, you know, create sort of this algorithm that can be applied to all of these situations. And thanks for that.
No problem. So just to clarify, you're asking when you're ingesting data from a bunch of different sources, how to weight things to be able to yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit
oh yeah, it's just so let's just like say for instance like a Klarna or an Affirm or something like that, right, where effectively their solution lives on multiple addresses. So you know, whether you're shopping from like say Casper to whether you're shopping on anything like that, say if your marketplace has those dynamics, but it's still you want to populate, you know, these recommendations, like does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, what would you like want to go into like the recommendations? Like, are they consistent among the, like, are the properties that like help decide a recommendation, like say for an Affirm, like if it's, you know, a price, or if it's like a like, are they consistent across, or are they different for each marketplace, or sorry, for each site that you're living on?
So I think at the start of it, we're looking to be sort of categorically constrained, and so there will be some similarities, right? And it's mostly like in the modern luxury products. And so I think the way that we're looking at it is sort of using a model like this to be a force amplifier, where an individual could curate the first 8 items, and then the 9th and 10th item that is surfaced is more so on preferences and what that individual is, you know, has sort of shown a track history on doing so.
I see. As long as you can you know, import the data. So for Relevance, for example, as long as you can like import the data that you're going to need to make that decision for what the 9th and 10th result would be, you can put weightings on it, and you can write whatever rules that you want to decide what should show up at the top of those. So yeah, as long as you can you know, send over the data that you need to be able to make that decision, you should be able to write the scoring algorithm.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we're just about wrapping it up. Is there anything else, Zach, you wanted to kind of share or leave us with?
I just wanted to thank you all for the amazing questions. It's cool to see how everybody's thinking about all this stuff. And yeah, if you want to learn more about Relevance, please reach out to me. If I can answer anything about search, even not Relevance related, happy to help. So yeah, thanks again for all the great questions, and I'll talk to some of you guys soon.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks once again for joining us. It's pretty cool to do our kind of first workshop for the group. And for everyone here, I'll upload the recording to YouTube in a little bit and then share the link in the workshop channel. And then we can we'll share this deck in there, and then we can just kind of continue the conversation there in the Slack group.